By the Association of Computing Machinery for Women and Hacker Society. My name is Rohi Mehta. I'm a junior studying computer science here at Case Western, and I'm currently the president of ACMW.
My name is Allie. I'm a junior also studying computer science, and I'm the public relations chair for ACMW.
We will both be your MC for this event. I can't express how amazing it is to see all of you here tonight. The hard work and dedication that has gone into organizing this conference by ACMW, Hacker Society, and the Veal Institute for Entrepreneurship has made tonight possible. Specifically, I wanted to thank Jimmy Salgado Juarez from ThinkBox and Michael Goldberg and Bob Sopko from the Veal Institute for Entrepreneurship and Mike Fisher for their endless support and mentorship throughout the planning process. Additionally, thank you so much to our sponsors, MRI Software, Rockwell Automation, XLab, and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Your generosity and support have further allowed us to come together to foster innovation and excitement about the new and coming field of AI.
Again, we are truly privileged tonight to be surrounded by so many successful individuals and professionals who are at the forefront of the AI industry. Among our distinguished panelists, we have the honor of hosting one of our very own Case Western alumni. All of our panelists' achievements not only inspire us, but also reflect the incredible potential of this field.
The event's proceedings are as follows. The first panel will be dedicated to exploring current trends and future directions in AI and technology. Esteemed panelists will share their expertise on emerging applications, advancements in machine learning algorithms, and the far-reaching implications of AI in society. This panel aims to further provide attendees with a comprehensive overview of the latest developments in the field, igniting their innovative thinking and inspiring future advancements. Following this session around 5 p.m., we will take a short break before diving into our second panel. This is your chance to connect directly with our esteemed panelists, sponsors, and faculty members, delving into the exciting developments in the field of AI. NASA Glenn will also be demoing visualizations from their GVIS lab. Please feel free to grab food outside. We will reconvene around 6 p.m. The last portion of this event will be the second panel. The second panel will delve into the ethical considerations and societal implications of AI. Thought-provoking discussions led by our panelists will shed light on critical topics such as algorithmic bias, privacy concerns, and ethical responsibilities of AI developers. This panel will emphasize the importance of AI development, fostering an understanding of the ethical frameworks necessary for its proper implementation. Just another reminder to ensure that you're checked in at the front so you're entered into our raffle. All prizes will be handed out after the conference.
And just as a final event protocol, please take a moment to silence all of your electronic devices before we get started with the panel. This will ensure a focused experience for everybody. And additionally, just a reminder that there is no food allowed inside of this auditorium, so just keep it to the black tables in that area over there. With that being said, let's hand it over to our moderators to kick off our first panel. Thank you so much.
Check. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Saw, and I'm one of your moderators tonight. I'm a third year studying computer science and economics, and today we're going to be going over future trends in AI.
Hello, everyone. My name is Priyan Rajamohan, and I'm a first-year master's student studying computer science. And it's really nice to see so many of you turn out here, and I think we can get started. Yep, I think it's me. Okay, so firstly, we're very happy to have so many esteemed experts before us. And before we dive into the session proper, I think it would be good to have our panelists introduce themselves. So please do give us your name, your current role and expertise, and also any background that you would like to highlight.
Yes, I'm Bradley Reynolds. I'm the Senior Vice President of Artificial Intelligence at a company called Expedient, which is a cloud and data center provider. I build their inference infrastructure and the product and sell it and all that kind of stuff. I was a Case Western Reserve attendee in 1996, and that was about that. Currently just building out stuff. Built and sold a bunch of technology companies in the interim, but now just doing AI full time.
Perfect. Thank you, Brett.
I'm Liz Crow. I am the Director of Urban Analytics and Innovation at the City of Cleveland. And my job is to build out the data architecture for the city, so in the civic tech space. And it it is, I would call it a never dull day, because we have a lot of data that goes both deep and wide. So if you think about a city, we have police, fire, EMS, an entire water department, an entire electrical department. We have all of the sewers in the city. We manage all of the parcels and properties in the city. There's about 170,000 of those, and data that's tracked on all of that activity.
Thank you, Liz. Dr. Ho.
Oh, thanks. Herb Schilling, triple grad from Case, go Case. And I work at the NASA Glenn Research Center. Mostly I've done scientific computing, but in the past few years, I've gotten more into the data science and AI. I don't really do the data science and AI. I hire interns to do a lot of that. But I'm part of an agency group that helps facilitate and provide training and all these other kinds of things just to try to help NASA make greater use of AI.
Hi, I'm Temi Tokwe. I'm probably the only student among the panelists, so I'm really honored to be here. So I'm presently a doctoral student at Cleveland State University. So presently my research is related to quantum computing and AI. So what we're trying to do is to develop quantum sensors with the use of AI and also quantum computing. So I'm more into quantum computing, quantum machine learning, AI, machine learning, deep learning. And I also work with Cleveland Metropolitan School District to train high school students on quantum computing and also AI. And previously, I have experiences working as a product manager and also a machine learning scientist for startups. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And just like that, I think we have like a diverse range of experts who have joined us today. And today we'll be exploring topics such as current challenges in AI and also educational initiatives, as well as the impact of AI across industries. And so, Ashley, what's the first question you have for our panelists here?
Yeah, so I think to get started off, could each of the panelists sort of describe how they currently interact with AI in their jobs or how their colleagues interact with AI? And, based on this experience, how do you see, AI shaping your respective industries within the next 5 to 10 years? And then, right now, based on your current experiences or how you interact with AI, do you foresee any transformative, technology or innovation in regards to AI?
Yeah, that's a question for the panel, so I think we can start.
Sure, right on. So the industry impact. So I was just out at a conference in San Francisco, and the famous venture capitalist Ben Horowitz said that these models, these AI models, whether they're large language models or not, are the new computers. They're the new versions of compute. And so we need to be thinking about them kind of that way. And that's a kind of a big change in terms of how we've viewed how we interact with data. So I think that notion of the next evolution of computation is going to be in reasoning engines and not just silicon is a pretty big sea change that's going to get implemented over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that kind of maybe another thing out there is that the notion of models, so you'll have large language models, general models, but people will fine tune those or build tune models for very specific tasks like talking SQL, talking to accounting, speaking Python or Go or something like that. And you'll have a body of models with a brain that's a general purpose reasoner and niche senses that are these kind of outlier models. And as a reference point from that same conference, Uber gave a presentation and said they run 5,300 models at one time every day to figure out all the stuff Uber does, how to get food, how to get taxis to where you want. And that's, they're at the forefront. But that's a huge evolution in how we process and interact with data that's going to happen soon.
I agree. How about you, Liz?
So the phrase I keep hearing is the hottest new coding language is English. And that, I think, is going to be a fundamental change in the way we think about code and the way we think about interacting with these models, in that we're going to be asking questions of models And sometimes it'll be those of us as data scientists and computer scientists, but in a lot of instances, it's going to be those people who aren't. And so just as we all had to learn how to use the internet, I know those of you in the audience grew up with the internet, but a bunch of us didn't. We had to learn how to interact with the internet and think about what does a search query mean when you type something into Google or Bing or another search site. We're going to have to learn how to interact with these models. I also, in my space, our first biggest challenge is data management and understanding what data we have and where we have it and how are those models going to be querying against that data. So I'm very much in that phase of organize what we have, assess that data quality, because garbage into the model is going to result in garbage out. So I think we're going to have to get a lot smarter about what examples we are training these models on and what data we're using to instruct the model. And a lot of our industries are going to have to get better and tighter about our data management.
Agree.
Yeah, and I'm hoping to cover things that other people did. But one of the things that we've talked about at NASA quite a bit is there's four different areas where we want to transform things: engineering, discovery, operations, and decision making. And I can't talk too much about the decision making too much, but let's maybe focus on a couple things like discovery. So, we do research, some fundamental research, especially at a place like NASA Glenn, which is a research center as opposed to a space flight system center like some of the other centers. So we're trying to make fundamental discoveries in materials, for example, or some other areas. And there's lots of papers out there, and how can we look into all of that and kind of augment the researchers to help them do their research quicker and better and find gaps in the research, because that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to do research and fill in those gaps. And then, for example, in operations, one of the big things would be space communications, and I might mention this later too, but like there's an internet for space. I mean, you may not realize that, and a lot of what happens up there now is very manually done, but they want to automate that a lot with a lot of AI, and they're going to have to as we send probes farther and farther into space. So that's my thing.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to go a bit technical and into research. So presently we know that quantum computing is like the next big word everyone is throwing out there after AI. And classical computers can process things well, right enough, good. But then when the problem becomes so interesting such that we are envisioning a very big solution, then classical computers can't do that. So right now we're trying to work on developing quantum computers that can be able to like solve problems and work on a lot of vast amount of data such that classical computers cannot be able to match that speed. So right now we are trying to work on models, AI models, converting them to quantum models. We have quantum supervised learning. We have quantum generative adversarial models. Just the classical side, we are converting it to quantum side. So there's also a paper recently that we published. It's on developing a quantum adversarial generative model such that we can use it to work on a medical image and be able to output more data. And in that way, quantum model is working in a very better speed and accuracy and generating more images that are better than classical images. So yeah, this is the side we're working on. And towards entrepreneurship, we are seeing a lot of innovation in AI, for example, in customer analytics. So one of the products we're working back in Nigeria, where I came from. So the product right now, we are using it to predict customer interactions with the website or maybe app, and with that, companies can be able to just make more profit than before. So this side of entrepreneurship, using AI with entrepreneurship, so it's really, really, really a good part of development. So the startup side of AI is actually helping most people in the country, especially in Nigeria, where AI is really low. We are trying to use it to like improve profit and also help people to make more make people actually help people to do more innovative stuffs around the world. So yeah, so that side, both entrepreneurship and also in research. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we just heard like a diverse range of impact in different industries, and I think that's really amazing. And Brad, like, so when we talk about future trends in AI, I think we can't avoid this topic of large language models. And I know that you've had the opportunity to help enterprises to build their own private GPTs. So I think something that I want to know is what are some key considerations that organizations need to take when they want to leverage large language models and while safeguarding their confidential information?
Yeah, so assuming you know what a large language model is, if you go from there and you're like, how do I want to use it responsibly? If you're a corporation, for instance, OpenAI's GPT-4 is an awesome large language model, but you're sending your data out to the open internet. And so what we suggest for people there is we actually built language models ourselves. They're not large ones that will do PII redaction. So the private information just gets pulled out and it says social security number instead of the social security number. So you can send that redacted to OpenAI and it reasons off of the rest of the information. So you get your reasoning. It's powerful, GPT-4. So that's like a way to do it, but not every organization's even comfortable with any data going out there. And so in those cases, you're like, okay, let's use, say, some quantized Llama 2, run it on a local GPU, and then it's localized. So you're asking your own server the answers, and you're okay with it not being redacted at that point because it's not going out to the open internet. So those are like banks and hospitals and folks that want to get the value of an LLM, but like are very nervous about data going out. They just can't do it. Or governments, things like that. So those are options. And then like probably the third thing is if you're going to use a large language model as a company or as an individual, you probably have some policies around it. As an individual, you can kind of do it yourself. But like for a company, you're like, okay, should we believe what's coming out of these models? Where can we use it? If I'm a lawyer, am I citing this in like cases? Yeah, everybody's kind of come to terms, and different companies will be a little more risk oriented and others will be more risk averse. And you set the policy, let people know. But my hope is that folks can figure out ways to use them in any company because they just unlock a huge amount of output value.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then I had a question for Erg, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So you are co-catalyst for big data and AI and biomimicry research at NASA Glenn Research Center. Could you talk a little bit about how you think AI and robotics is going to affect biomimicry research?
Yeah, I'm not going to include much of the robotics aspect, but just go AI and biomimicry. So as it happens, there's this one project I'm on. The bigger project's called PETAL, Periodic Table of Life. It's kind of a lofty goal. But within that, the goal is to use AI and lately large language models to make it easier for engineers to come up with bio-inspired solutions to their engineering problems. So right now, the way it works, and so there's an organization called the Biomimicry Institute that has kind of a framework for how you do biomimicry. There's key steps along the way. You just don't think biomimicry. There's a process to it. And right now it's a manual process, but what this AI tool, and it's in its very, very early stages, and it works as a chat bot, but it takes you through the process of going through this Biomimicry Institute's biomimicry process. I forgot the exact name of the process, but and it uses large language models to generate ideas, and then you feed that into the next step. And that's the hope and the goal of this kind of a tool.
Very cool.
Thanks.
I think now that we have talked a little bit about impact in the different industries and also a little bit about large language models, I think it's good to talk about disruptions. So my question to the panel is, as we talk about shaping the future with AI, I think it's relevant to talk about how at an organizational level each of your industries preparing for disruptions that AI may bring to your industry.
Yeah, ours is pretty simple because we're a service provider. So we're not necessarily looking as much at our own company as what clients are going to be using AI for. So our goal is how do we make it super, super easy for them to deploy models at scale so that they can ask business questions and be like, hey, I want to understand this about this at a business level. And we'll abstract all the AI stuff away. So for our business, it's about orchestrating and architecting like a large scalable solution. But from our customer's perspective, it's I just want an API call to ask this question, and it could be a PII redactor, it could be I want some knowledge processed, I want SQL or Python code to come back. Just give me an endpoint, and I'll orchestrate it from there. And so our job is to make that super, super easy. And right now we're just, in the sandbox with a lot of people messing around with it. And that's our program.
Thank you, Brad.
So we're as a civic tech space is very early in the phase of using AI to disrupt our industry. And we're starting to see little disruption. So for example, companies are just coming on the market who will drive over every street in your city. They will take camera footage of all of the road pavement and then give you back a pavement condition rating of every lane mile in your city. So you're able to then, as a policymaker, take that map and say, okay, red, yellow, green, these streets are good, these streets are less good, these streets are falling apart. All right, we know where we can pick and prioritize our resources. We have cities like Baltimore that are doing flyovers of their city every other year. And what they're looking for is actually roof conditions. And they're starting to use AI to read the specificity on that map. And they can get down, the satellite images are now good enough that they can get down to a 2-inch diameter. And so they're starting to see, are the roofs on the famous Baltimore row houses collapsing in? And do they have a problem with the structural integrity of those row houses? So starting to do proactive prevention of the quality of the houses. The Google car drives the city of Cleveland roughly every year. They do most streets just about every year. Can we start to take some of that future questions, or can we start to take some of that historic imagery and see trends and changes in the quality of our housing stock in the city? I'd like to ask future questions of, could I put a camera on every bus in the city? While it's driving around, can it look for things like illegal signs that were posted, stop signs and street signs that may be missing or falling apart, potholes, areas where the city is falling apart, quality of life issues for all of us where you're like, Lord, that's annoying. I just need somebody to fix it. We as a city are hoping to, in the future and today in specific use cases, use that AI to make decisions better, faster, easier, and starting to use the data we can collect easily or are already collecting today to drive those innovations and those decisions in terms of serving our residents better.
Amazing. I think we just got like a couple of project ideas. Oh, dear.
Yeah. So I'm going to pick on something that's kind of maybe more specific to NASA. So in some ways, the end product of NASA is data. And we have lots of data. So we get data from satellites and probes and wind tunnels and all kinds of different test facilities, and we've been doing that for decades. So we've got all this data, and a lot of it's been never been looked at before, and because we just don't have enough people to go through all that. And NASA tries as much as possible to make a lot of that data public, and they're even pushing harder to make that data public. But again, there's only so many people, but we're hoping that things like AI can help with the analysis of that data and extracting insights that have gone unnoticed for decades. So we're hoping that would be a disruptive advance in making use of NASA data in the future years.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a project we're working on with Cleveland Clinic. It involved the use of quantum computing and AI. So our brain generates magnetic field due to neural activities in the brain. And classical sensors cannot sense this because of the Heisenberg limits placed on the power of sensing. So with quantum sensors, we hope that even the minute or the less signal in the brain can be sensed. And this can help detect even diseases like epilepsy at the early stage. And we are also hoping that with that, we can even detect brain cancer even before they start developing in the brain. So with that, we are combining quantum computing with AI, quantum computers, quantum sensors to sense this signal in the brain. And we'll use AI to predict those diseases like epilepsy, cancer. And it's a very big project. And we're hoping that with this, it can actually disrupt the health industry and create a lot of innovative solutions.
Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, very cool. So after hearing about all these amazing applications of AI, one of the things that comes to mind is what are like sort of the ethical considerations you have to take when going forward and potentially implementing all of these amazing solutions. So yeah,
Yes.
if you would like to start actually.
So I think she mentioned something about our AI is as good as the quality of data we give it. So there is bias in AI presently. There's an issue of using AI in the police industry just to catch criminals, and the AI definitely identify black people as criminals. That's a very big bias. If you have asked ChatGPT, recently it was published on LinkedIn, asking ChatGPT like what are the kind of jobs a woman can do. And it's saying that, oh, a woman can be a cleaner, can be this, can be that. Jobs that definitely are not just for women. And the bias actually is affecting a lot of our models. So definitely the quality of data should be able to help our AI models to give a very good accuracy and also reduce the bias. And also there's something about the transparency of AI models. All AI models are actually black box. We don't know what is happening in those models. And this is actually creating a lot of distrust of AI models, especially in the health industry. Most people don't want to use it to predict diseases or also predict things that are happening in the health industry, because we need to trust the AI models we are using. We need to trust that this kind of drugs, if we take this drug predicted by an AI, it will definitely solve or cure my disease. So definitely two things in ethics: the transparency of AI models and also the bias in data.
Agreed.
Right next.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this might be kind of a different thing, but I also get involved with a group of people called the NASA Creatives. There's a large number of people at NASA that create images, videos, and all those kinds of things that some of you probably watch. And with things like Midjourney and DALL-E and things like that, they're interested in using them, but they're trying to think ethically about all of that. So there's a couple of things, there's many things they're worried about, but the whole issue of copyright, the fact that some of these models have been trained on other people's images, they're worried about that. So actually right now at NASA, we're not allowed to use those kinds of tools right now until they work through all those issues. And the other thing is misinformation. So you can use those kinds of tools to generate whatever you want. And we're worried about, because we've always had to deal with conspiracy theories of, like we never went to the moon or whatever you can crazy think of. And all these tools are just going to make it easier to make images that just fuel all those conspiracy theories. So we're always worried about that kind of thing. So.
Awesome. Liz?
An example from my world, I was talking to our law department a couple weeks ago, specifically about AI, and there was an attorney who had typed into ChatGPT, "Hey, give me the case law for this," treating it like it was a Google search engine. And it spat back an entire article that sounded intelligent, and he submitted it to court. And then he figured out that that wasn't actually case law. It wasn't actually a search engine, and he got disbarred pretty quickly thereafter. And it's it's true, actually, it's a true story. And it's an illustration of where we need to educate ourselves and our community about what these models are and they are not. Google search works in a fundamentally different way than a large language AI model. Rightfully so, but we are not educated yet as a society on what these things do and don't do and when we use one versus the other. And so as we're training the models and we're thinking about those biases for the data within the models, it's also educating ourselves on what can we trust out of these models and what can't we trust out of these models. I ask ChatGPT questions all the time, and some of the advice and counsel I was given was treat it like a really good intern. Trust it, but with verification. So it's really good at writing a first draft, but I've got to proof it and read it and still be an intelligent thinker in the room. And so I fully agree with all the ethical considerations that have been brought up. But I would add thinking about how we as a society understand how to interact with these tools. And I think we just don't know yet. We're too early, and that's okay. But it means we need to be smart about how early we really are.
Amazing. Brad, over to you.
So I don't operationally deal with this, but intellectually it's a super interesting issue in a bunch of areas. So if you think of how a large language model like GPT-4 is trained, it kind of groks the entire internet, builds statistical mappings between words, tokens, kind of themes, structures, and then you have a raw model. We don't ever see the raw model. That raw model is a reflection of whatever's out on the internet, and we know what's out on the internet. It can be all over the place. But what's out on the raw internet is a reflection of who we actually are. So when people are like, oh, these models are biased, and well, it's kind of like a mirror to start out with, and then they take fine tunes and try and take some of that racism and sexism and all those things out of it. But we're essentially acting in a fine tune as a morals police. And that is it's just a difficult problem. Super interesting. You don't want this model to be racist, but like, where do you draw lines? So I don't have a lot of answers on that particular piece, but it's interesting to see how people do it. There's also models that come out that they don't put through any of that. There's a French group, Mistral, who just published a 7 billion parameter model that apparently didn't have any of this. And people are using it to make bombs and like things like that. That's, I think, to the greater issue. It's not very difficult to make a decent model. And there's open source versions that you can build off of from like Meta. Everybody can do whatever they want with those. And so it's like, okay, the cat's out of the bag. So like OpenAI, that can be regulated and kind of bias can be removed. I don't know about Mistral. I don't know about Llama and what people are going to fine tune it and what crazy stuff. It's like a tool. And, I don't know who's going to use that tool. So that's intriguing. I think all positive net. And then there's the small item of copyright. And I've taken a look at the copyright stuff. I'm kind of stoked about it from a legal perspective. Everything that I've seen that comes out of these models, I would say is creative. I would say that the same thing that musician used to create that song seems to be a similar process of statistical averaging that a model does. It's not just a deterministic system. And I think they're going to have a real tough road to claim that this is just aping copyrighted material. That would be my thought. But that's an intriguing spot. There's lots of money involved. There's creative people that might lose money. And you don't want to see a creative person lose money. But that'll play out in kind of court, unfortunately. But I think some interesting learning lessons about what is really under the hood. Is this thing just a stochastic parrot, or is it an actual creative entity? I kind of am going towards the latter one on that. So it's just interesting to figure out.
Awesome.
Actually, I think just to summarize, I think we heard diverse perspectives. I think we started with bias. I think we did hear about bias. And also we heard about copyright issues. And we also heard about knowledge gap and also restricting or regulating access to knowledge. So I think that's really interesting and very different perspectives. Ashley, you want to say that?
Oh, yeah. I actually kind of wanted to circle back to you. And I wanted to ask, so we have a lot of students in the room who are, potentially looking into pursuing AI research after, after this conference, after they graduate. Do you have any advice for them when going into research, how to make a meaningful and ethical impact in the field?
I think everybody is already on the right path. It starts with a good educational background, whether formal education or online education or self-study. I actually learned AI through self-study. I had a background in physics for my master's, for my bachelor's, and also for my former PhD. So all was in physics before I decided to come into computer science. And so one thing is being able to learn and also like being passionate about learning. So another important thing is that don't be afraid to diversify. As I said, I started with physics, pure physics, electronics, and a lot of quantum mechanics and things like that. So, and then I fell in love with AI. I decided to learn AI, machine learning, and deep learning. Then thereafter, I saw that there's a lot of intersection between quantum computing and AI. Then I decided to like work on both at the same time, using AI to solve problems in quantum computing and also using quantum computing to solve problems in AI. So yeah, so being able to learn, not afraid to diversify, and also just keep up with the trends and tools in all these industries. Yeah, I think you are good to go.
Awesome. Thank you. About this next question, I think I don't really know if I should park it under ethical consideration. So a while ago when I spoke to a friend of mine, I think a joke that he casually said was software engineers manage to automate themselves out of jobs. So my next question is, so how do we ensure that, what kind of measures can we take to make sure that human AI collaboration is kind of made the focus and it kind of empowers human AI collaboration rather than replacing human workers? So I think that's a general question to the panel.
Yeah, so I think the first step is it's going to replace kind of the rote stuff. So like coders that I know, they just use it as kind of a co-pilot, and it like figures out, okay, these methods that are common for Python, like it'll just autocomplete what's a for loop, what, you know, you don't have to remember what's the syntax. Great, they're going to use that. So they're going to abstract all of those more rote pieces. And so what's left? They're going to use their brains to like come up with this thesis or this creation of how I want this whole orchestration to work. That's still the human domain. And so when people are like, oh, well, if that person can save 80% of their time, we can let a bunch of the coders go. I mean, most companies would be like, well, that just means we can do 4 times the cooler stuff. We can build 4 times more. And so like, I think it's extremely myopic to say, oh, we can save with AI, so let's cut into people. It should be, we can save with AI so we can build bigger things faster. And that's where I see all the like coding stuff and, you know, maybe AI in general going.
I would say that we no longer need as many horse and buggy whip makers, and that's okay. And just as the car changed how we drive, how we transport, how we get around, and therefore we eliminated some jobs and we created others, AI is going to do the same thing. So yes, there are jobs that will go away. There are jobs that will change. It will change the fundamental nature of how we do our work. But just as Brad said, that's not necessarily bad. It's just different. And it's okay to embrace different, especially at this stage in your career when you're early and you're learning and you're hungry and you're ready to take on new challenges. It's okay to say, yeah, it's all right that this is going to look a little different than it did a few years ago. But I think what AI does for us is not, I agree with Brad, not eliminate the need for coders or for people with technical literacy. In fact, it does quite literally the opposite, because we're still learning how we use these models. And, you know, if I use the premise of AI is going to write me some really good code, it's going to write me some really good code that maybe a really good intern would write. But you still need an intelligent person, especially today, who can read that code. But maybe now I have more time to do that next cool block of code that I didn't have time to do in a previous iteration. So yes, it'll evolve the way we work. I wouldn't be scared of that. I would actually embrace that as an opportunity, not as a problem that we have to, not tackle.
Thank you.
A couple things. I think I've touched on this a little bit before, but in the area of AI, a lot of what happens in NASA when we talk about AI is developing a research assistant, because we do research, and there's a lot of what research does is just like other people were saying, just kind of the rote things that you have to do over and over and over again. So how can you automate some of that so that you can do higher level thinking and do the cool and the fun stuff and come up with new ideas without having to do the dirty work, I guess. And then the other thing I was thinking of was, and I know there's a couple of JPL people in the audience who probably maybe know more than I do about this, but like to drive the rovers on Mars, in the beginning, that was very much, from what I understand, figuring things out step by step and manually figuring all these other things out. But now you can almost at a level have the rovers do science. Like you can say, I'm interested in looking for rocks that look like this. Rover, go do that, and it'll find the rocks and it'll drive to the rocks and do all the other things. And I don't know about and so it's not taking away a job from anybody. It's just making the job actually cooler and funner, I think. So,
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I would say we should change what we preach. We preach more about the fear of AI, what AI can do. It will do this, do that. It's going to break the encryption. There will be no jobs. It will destroy the world. Like, we are preaching the fear too much. We should focus more on what it can do for us. Yeah, there will always be bad guys, but definitely we should prepare more on how we can create a lot of solutions to just stop those bad things from happening. So yeah, preach the fear, but definitely don't focus on the fear. Preach more about what it can do, so that layman and the society can be able to adopt these technologies like easily, instead of being afraid of these technologies. Yeah.
Thank you.
And it was really cool hearing about all of your essentially how to adjust all these attitudes towards job displacement in AI. But another thing that Liz touched on earlier that I was interested in delving more into was essentially like the educational aspect around AI, especially for students and professionals. What kind of skills or AI literacy do you think is necessary for students and professionals to make sure that AI is being implemented properly and used properly? Liz, if you'd like to start, or if anyone else would like to jump in.
Sure, I can start. I would say first things first is learn the foundational fundamentals. It's really hard to learn the complicated stuff if you haven't taken some basic coding classes, if you haven't taken some basic data literacy classes. And it's okay to spend some time on those really foundational fundamentals. I would say the other thing that's really critical is a level of curiosity. Ask questions. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. The most frustrating thing when I'm dealing with either a coder on my team or an analyst on my team is somebody who's like, well, they told me it's blue, so I'm just going to assume that that's fine. Okay, did you ask them why? And asking a lot of those questions of why does it work this way and how does it work that way? Because you will uncover more by asking why, the 7 layers of why, than you will by just taking what people are telling you at face value, especially in these really, really early phases of this technology where most of us don't get it either, and that's okay.
Brad, you want to go next?
The education one is probably what I'm most passionate about. I never thought that I would need linear algebra in any practical application until that's the entire basis that's underneath it. It's just matrix multiplication. I'm like, wow, I remember learning that in college. I got to refresh. What did I use to refresh? My Chat GPT. It was my tutor as I was doing it. So, I was taking courses on Coursera and stuff like that, which are great. And then my Chat GPT was my PhD or whatever that helped me out learn. So that was awesome. But at the end of the day, to me, I'm more of a entrepreneur cowboy. I just do it. You can put LM Studio on your laptop, run a model from Hugging Face, and you can put Streamlit on front. You have a chatbot. And there's a bunch of tutorials on how to do that. And you see to do it. And so I read newsletters every day. There's community meetups like Ted, who's going to present later. He has an AI meetup that's open to anybody. I mean, it's professionals, students, whatever. you go to that, and then, maybe internships. So like, again, the just do it for me, it's like, I'm hiring for Expedient right now for people that are AI DevOps people, and we're going to break some stuff. Like we're learning too. And, but that entrepreneurial hacker mentality, it works right now. In 5 years, it'll be all buttoned up and a lot of things will be figured out in there. But right now it's a cowboy zone, and there's a certain set of person that's good. And so it's doesn't matter whether you're female, male, what race you are, what nationality, who can get the job done is kind of the thing right now. And that's an opportunity for young, old, any race, any gender. And I think that's pretty cool spot.
I would add, speaking of linear algebra, this is deeply true. So I had a friend in linear algebra when I was an undergrad, and the two of us sat in the back of the room. I think we both got C's in linear algebra. We just struggled through this bad boy. And he's now the AI expert at the Brookings Institute on global AI policy, and I'm here. So it's okay to struggle. And we both landed here through this route of AI and data science, and linear algebra was still the downfall for both of us. So
I guess I'm next. I just also, both two things. I wanted to echo what Brad said about just kind of doing, that's what we've been emphasizing a lot. Experiment, fail, learn by doing is a big thing. And the other thing I wanted to mention was kind of echoing what Liz said a while ago, but data management, that always seems to be glossed over. Take all these fancy classes on courses on how to do all the fun, interesting machine learning stuff, but if the data is not good, then it doesn't get you anywhere. And so you really, really, really have to start with that, and just being aware of that across the board with all the people, because some of the people are the data collectors, and if they don't talk to the people who are doing the analysis, it's not going to be a good end product. So a lot more communication and understanding across the board, from data collectors all the way down to the analysts. So,
Yeah, I think I would say learn by doing. I failed in the number of startups I've failed in is probably more than the number of courses I've failed in. So as I said, I didn't have any formal education in AI or deep learning. So what we do then with a group of friends is that if we have any idea, we just decide to do a project on it. Then from there, it developed into startups that some we got funding for, some after the funding, it went bankrupt, some are still running. So I think if you have any idea on AI, you want to learn, don't spend too much time taking courses on Coursera, doing that. It's good, but then as you are taking courses, be building projects. It's very important. You learn faster that way by building projects, and that is how I learned AI. I started with building projects every step of the way, and it has helped me a lot, even till now. Yeah.
Awesome. I think I failed linear algebra too. I think with that, we kind of wrap up our panel session. I think now we open up the floor for questions from the audience. If you have any questions, you can just put a hand up.
We discussed a little bit about the viability of these models to actually help out human beings. I read a paper recently about something called the reversal curse in these language models, where they're incapable of generalizing that some thing A equals B. They can't generalize that B equals A. I just wanted to get your thoughts on, that kind of curse, or what do you think the implications of it are?
for me,
Just anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that folks like analogies seem to be a difficult area, which is a way that humans can move knowledge across different. So like that's a tough one. That's just like a tough, and math, deep math is a tough one. And so what seems to be happening now is when folks are finding weak areas, they're figuring out how to add specialized training to. So if you're like, hey, it's really not good at symmetric relation, whatever the thing is, let's give it 50,000, 500,000 examples, finely curated examples, not general internet learn this. Here's an example of how this symmetry should work in our language. And then go through the tests that you're talking about. Say, hey, let's run through 100,000 of those tests. Has this actually improved our efficacy on whatever it is, whether it's symmetry or certain types of mathematics? It seems to be how people are going at it now. Yeah, I think that's a way to do it. So there's a notion, nobody knows this for sure, but that OpenAI's GPT-4 model isn't a model like Llama 2 is. It's actually 8 different models that have some specificity, that there's a router that routes the thing to, oh, this is a code thing. We're going to send that to the code specific brain. No one knows that exactly, but it kind of makes sense that that's how it works. And so then you won't be just fine tuning the main model. You'll be fine tuning the one that knows mathematical relations or something like that.
I would add, our models are only as good as the data that they're trained on. And a lot of these large, especially ChatGPT models where they're being trained on the open internet, there's huge holes in the data that they see. So they don't see medical data. They don't see financial data. They don't see data that's housed within a corporation, within an enterprise, within a government institution. They don't see Department of Defense data. They see some police data, but not all the police data. So, knowing that yes, you've got to train on their specificity of how they think about decision making. The other level of training that they're missing, and this is where corporations and government entities can start to pick this up, is on, how do we think about things like diseases? Those models are really contained to like disease specific data or government specific data. So they may be missing some areas in there. How do we generalize across? They may only generalize across what they can see, but they can't see everything. Does that kind of help? Yeah.
Very cool. Anyone else has any questions? Yeah. I think she might need a mic.
I think
Okay, cool.
I'm standing up because I can't actually see everyone's faces. So you all are coming at this from a pretty technical corporate viewpoint, but as we're seeing in the past few years, especially the last year since ChatGPT became really a well-known thing, we're seeing the broader public also become aware of AI and technology. And I was wondering if you guys had a sense of how you expect the broader public to be interacting, especially in sort of non-tech jobs, essentially. How you expect the broader public to be interacting with AI, whether they know it or not, in the next, 3 to 5 years. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I could take it because I'm so public facing. I think we don't know. Have you ever tried to teach your grandmother to use the internet? It's a little tough. And she's a little confused sometimes, and sometimes she's really good at it, and they know the things you know, and you don't know the things you don't know. And I think we have another way of learning how to use these kind of models, just like we all had to learn how to use the internet. We're all going to have to relearn how to use the internet and how to interpret these things. So I think what we've heard a lot from the panel is, for those of us who are tech literate and data literate and becoming AI literate, we're using a lot of these models to do a lot of our rote tasks. Hey, write a thank you note. And it's pretty good at that, and you go, okay, I can be an intelligent operator. I can skim through it. I can kind of follow that process. I think the general public is going to have to get over that learning curve, and we're still so early in that process of others starting to adopt it. We're only just hitting some of those use cases, and they tend to be either like write a thank you note or, let's do this really complicated, really cool, really innovative project. That middle space is a big to be developed space.
Does that help?
Well, it certainly is.
Okay.
I have something
yeah.
for that
Yeah.
one too. So I think it'll come from like your guys' age and 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like they'll just naturally, you guys will naturally take to it. My son that's 10 naturally takes to it. He hasn't been trained that you have to interact with Google by asking a question and then going to a web page. So for him, it's just a conversation, which is what it's supposed to be. But it also doesn't feel like cheating, which it maybe should feel a little bit like cheating. But that's a block for somebody my age at 45. It's like, it does feel like cheating. It's weird to readjust 20 years of reinforcement that we ask a question and then we go read.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we asked a question, that's not quite right. I need you to clarify that. Can you give me more of it? That's the way that it really works. And so it'll take a little while. So like parents will see their kids doing it, and then they'll probably like start imitating what that is because they'll see the value that comes out of it. And it's just kind of also makes you feel weird to talk and have a conversation with a, piece of software. It's a whole different thing.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you. I think we are done with panel 1, I guess. Do we still have time for one more question? I think we still have time for one more question. So anyone? Yeah.
So one of you mentioned earlier, and it was a big idea in the AI space, that these large language models are basically just the math parrots. And I've been seeing sort of a shift in perspective recently as people sort of try to peer into that black box and find out that there's actually more going on there than a really complex Markov chain. And so I want to know, like, what are your guys' personal opinions? Like, is there something more going on in there, or could there be something more going on in there, or is it just that we're more that we're governed more by statistics than we think we are?
Yeah.
So I'm super stoked about this particular area because I've been doing a lot of research just from a provider perspective of people want to know what's inside the box. Like if you're a corporation, you want to know what's inside the box. As an individual, you want to know it's not a mechanical Turk, what is this thing? And so there's a lot of research going on. There's a lot of actual companies messing around with it. And so if we're thinking about this like big, dense neural network of like billions and billions of parameters, some of the cool stuff that I saw was visual things. And it would think about things as like, as these networks are processing like a sentence, parts of it light up, like parts of our brain light up for certain, like if this is a pain sensor type thing or whatever. And people are like looking at, oh, this network's lighting up like our brain is lighting up. Like, oh, this seems to be a center that processes like those, logic relationships. We don't really know, but the funny thing is we don't really know how our brain works either. And we've been looking at that thing for a long time, but that's what people are kind of figuring out. And there's other things outside of the actual workings of like the dense neural network as to how certain inputs cause certain outputs, to be like things like, does this model bias for credit score determination? Like if we're determining credit, there's a lot of stuff that's like, okay, we want to know whether this model is fair. So there's stuff that's going around there. But no, I don't believe it's a stochastic parrot. That was something that somebody brought up that sounded like a funny thing to say. But I believe it's creative. And frankly, at the most philosophical level, I believe it's some sort of an alien intelligence. Alien meaning like we just haven't had experience directly with it. It's different from us. And we're trying to anthropomorphize these LLMs. Oh, this is a person and has consciousness. Like, it's just different. And it's coming up with interesting stuff in a different way than our brains do. And I don't know what that means, but it's alien would be a word. And I'm, maybe this is, instead of coming down from spaceships, we just created it. So it's interesting.
I think that's it. I think thank you so much for patiently answering all our questions. I think just about in the past 1 hour, we kind of touched upon different areas relating to future trends in AI. And I think I can hand the time over to the MCs.
Thank you all so much to our panelists and our moderators for an amazing first panel. We'll now take a short break before diving into our second panel. This is a chance for you to connect directly with our speakers, sponsors, as well as our faculty members, delving into the exciting developments in the field of AI. So please feel free to grab food outside. Just a reminder that there is no food in the auditorium, so just keep that in mind, and we'll reconvene around 6 p.m. for the second panel. Thank you.
Good job, moderator.
Good stuff. Thank you all for your active participation in our networking sessions. Your engagement and insightful discussions have truly made this event so successful.
Once again, we just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to our sponsors. Without them, this event would not be happening. Also, their commitment to sharing their knowledge of all things in this exciting field with students like us is invaluable, so thank you so much.
I just wanted to add another announcement, which is that NASA is having their Space Apps Challenge this weekend. It's on spaceappschallenge.org. You can go into NASA Glenn if you are a U.S. citizen, or online. Of course, it's open to everyone. So if you're interested, again, go to spaceappschallenge.org. So I just wanted to share that. With that, I'm pleased to announce that we will now transition into our second panel discussion. I'll hand it over to our moderators to get started with the last segment of the event. Just a reminder, please take a moment to silence all electronic devices before we get started with our second panel. Just another reminder, there is no food allowed in the auditorium. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to our panel space. Before we get started, I just wanted to quickly thank all of our sponsors again for tabling with us today, and I hope you all got a chance to connect with the panelists for both panels. And this will be the second panel, and we will now switch gears and discuss the ethical considerations and societal implications of AI. My name is Crystal Zhu. I'm a second-year data science student, and I'm also the secretary for ACMW and one of the moderators for this panel.
Hi, my name is David Frost. I'm a fourth-year computer science student doing the integrated BSMS program here at Case, and I'm studying artificial intelligence for my master's degree. I'm the president of the ACM, also known as HacSoc, which is one of the organizations that's co-hosting this event, and I'm one of the moderators for this panel. So we're going to start off with a quick introduction of the panelists. So each person can share their name, what they currently do for work, and any other relevant previous experience or research.
Yeah, I'll start off. My name's Ted Troxel. I've been doing machine learning for over 11 years now. I worked in a bunch of different industries, whether it's in like the medical field, additive manufacturing, ad tech, a whole bunch of different things. I currently sit on the Metro Health Institutional Review Board, so I have like an insight into what ethics looks like from medical research, and I think that is like an interesting aspect to see how, as we develop new AI ethics protocols, how we kind of bridge those together.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sunny Southern, and I work for Alphabet, a subsidiary called Verily, and we focus on precision health, and we are committed to bringing the promise of precision health to everyone every day. And so that everyone, every day, the everyone part especially really is about making sure that our products are available and accessible to people from all walks of life, and also making sure that we get more representation from the appropriate groups for clinical trials.
Hey everybody, Chris Louise. I was a scientist and became a data scientist and became a software engineer, chasing the point of leverage at which we could really drive the most value for organizations. Where I am now is I handle customer-facing tech at a company that sells AI governance software to large and regulated industries.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your introductions. Now, I just want to give a little brief introduction to everyone with a question of how do you guys currently interact with AI in your career?
I'll start off again. So currently I build what are called surrogate machine learning models. I work in additive manufacturing right now, so if you're familiar with anything like CAD, like when people design cars, they'll do like, how does air flow over that? Simulations like that can be expensive, and so what I do is I use machine learning to speed those up. This makes manufacturing a lot more competitive for onshoring it versus offshoring it.
So I'm responsible for what's called the go-to-market strategy and execution for our care and research products at Verily. And as you can imagine, in a tech company, AI and ML really need to be embedded in as many places as they possibly can. And so my responsibility is understanding what we're building and making sure that what we're building has product market fit. So we're not just building cool things because we can, and at Alphabet we have lots and lots of cool things, but we're building things because people actually need them. They're going to make a valuable impact on the market, and they're going to be profitable. So people are going to be willing to pay more for what we build than what it takes us to build and maintain them.
I'd say my current interaction sits somewhere between the two of you. So I don't typically build models anymore unless I'm building demonstration models, but it's my job to go and speak to large data science teams and organizations at very large companies, understand what they're doing holistically across the teams, what models are driving value for them, which models are significantly exposing them to risks that they may not understand, and helping them build models that are risk controlled in such a way that they can also derive the business value that they need to.
Thanks so much for the answers. I guess we can move on to the next question, which is how do we balance the potential benefits of AI with concerns over data privacy and security? So that everybody can answer this question.
Sure. So when you look at things from like an ethical perspective, there's like 5 vectors that support that. And one of them is benefit for society. Like, is it beneficial? When we look at like what type of data is collected to build most of the machine learning models that you interact with on a daily basis, you really have to think about like, is this data being beneficial for society? Like, what benefits do we get from this? There's a lot of different benefits that you can look at. There's national security. Like, how does our government use our data to build machine learning models to build a better defense system? How do we build new companies that grow our economy? There's a lot of different aspects to just more than, hey, this facial recognition captured me and now I have a ticket, or, I drove on through Newburgh Heights and their machine learning model captured my license plate and I'm now fighting a ticket. So when we look at, in my opinion, when we look at privacy is, how do we maintain control over our data and release that to make some type of societal benefit?
So the balance of the benefit versus the risk, and if the risk is privacy and security, I think the first thing we need to look at, and at Verily we take this super seriously, and that is informed patient consent. So we do deal a lot with protected health information and other types of data. And it's really, we have the approach, and it's actually one of the reasons I joined the company, because I've been a huge proponent of helping individuals, all of you and all of us, to really understand what the implications of people using our data means. And there are places and opportunities and instances where you want to share your data, and there are others that are not. And since this is an ethics conversation, and I'm not a political person, it's actually truly, I'm not just making it up, it's against my religion to participate in some politics. But if you look at what's happening right now with women's health issues and the privacy the privacy of our health data is more important than ever, because people can get access to our health information and things that we've done or not done to our bodies, or medications that we take or we don't take. And that can have very detrimental impact. It can send us to jail. It can do all kinds of things. And so making sure that we protect people's privacy related to their health information is more important than ever. And there's a lot of other reasons. Health data is one of the most sought after information by hackers, because once you have a person's health record, you can pretty much get into any other type of environment, right? Get credit cards, use their credit for all kinds of things. So at the end of the day, first of all, we are serious, very, very serious about protecting people's health information, and there's no compromise there. And then when we go to think about how we're going to use that information, we have something called HIPAA, the Health Information Portability and Accessibility Act, so both. And that governs how our data is to be used. And so there are 14 things for safe harbor, and I could go on and about it, but I think there are certain rules that we can't overcome. And so then we look to make sure that whenever we are using health information, that we definitely want to make sure that the benefits outweigh the risk, and that the individuals whose data it is, that they are informed about how their information is going to be used, and that we have the control over who gets to see it, what they get to see, and for how long they get to have access to it.
Great answer, Sunny. So my experience is a lot of it is within the insurance industry. I was formerly at Progressive before I joined my current role. And within that industry, much like in healthcare, if you're looking at life insurance or health insurance, they are ingesting those things and decisions are being made on them. Largely within insurance, data for a very long time has been used to make decisions about very real things in people's lives, whether that is issuing you a life insurance policy, denying you healthcare service, whether it's just claiming or putting you through a special investigations unit process because they believe fraud was part of your car accident. It can be very painful for people at points in time when they are most vulnerable. And I think you really need to be very cognizant and protective. So is that AI? Not necessarily, but models can make independent decisions about many of these facets. I've worked across some of these things, and they do. And most data scientists, practitioners are in no way trying to drive negative outcomes for people, but they need to understand the decisions that go into those things. And when we're talking about data privacy and sort of personal privacy of the things that are inherently yours, whether those, whatever data points this might be, there's a few things that I think about that could be done better. And this isn't strictly for insurance, but across a number of industries that use this type of data. Is your data being modeled on? Is the response that you got being produced by a particular model because they have data field ABC? Are they allowed to use that? Have you allowed a company to do that? What is the and like having, as you said, Sunny, like knowing where your data is being used, not just from a data field, but also from a modeling perspective to drive a score or drive a decision that impacts the consumer. I think over time, these are things that we're going to see. And I'm interested to see it because I think while AI drives immense value and will make our lives better in many ways, I don't think it's going to do it on accident. And I think there needs to be a lot of oversight.
I think we should skip up the order next time.
Yeah.
I guess just a follow-up for Chris about this, like specifically about the insurance industry, like the customer data there is very sensitive. So like, how do you feel like the industry is currently like handling the balance between efficiency and respecting privacy and ethics in that regard?
Yeah, great question. That's so some of the things that are happening now are there's a governing board over insurance companies within, or it's not a governing board. It's called the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And these commissioners run at a state level, make laws about what you can and cannot do within their state. They've recently published a bulletin on what they say is acceptable from an AI sort of perspective, what principles they adhere to, and sort of some suggestions about how people should look at things and what reporting requirements should be. There are some companies that are electing to take on more disclosure than they necessarily need to, and they'll do that. They'll be forced to do some of these things, but what I mentioned before, the model disclosure, I think is really important. I think within insurance and a number of other fields, you have things that are problematic, data fields that have traditionally been used and are still used, such as credit score and zip code, that are absolutely contain proxy bias, particularly when you look at race, ethnicity, and social class. And while there are ways, one of the positioning points of insurance companies is we don't collect race. So we don't know. We don't know that. Well, within the industry, it's not exactly a secret that we know that it's encoded in there. These are statistically sophisticated people that are building these models, but it is something that they're allowed to model on. I believe one thing that can and should be done is collecting that protected class information to actually debias the model on the back end. So if you have this information, you can actually change and you can rebalance the model. Now, is this right or not? I don't know. It has to, in practice, it's really much how you put this into practice, but it is possible. And pretending that there's no bias because you didn't collect the actual class when we know it's encoded in other variables is disingenuous. So I hope that is something that we see change.
Yeah, I guess moving on now, I think, Sunny, you mentioned that there are regulations industry-wide about model making or AI development, but are there really any existing ethical frameworks or guidelines that you personally might recommend following for AI development or deployment? And this is for every panelist, not just Sunny, sorry.
So I'm not going to tell you my own principles, but I will tell you what alphabets are. And anybody can search these if you go to if you search Google's AI principles, they're published. And so you pointed out the very first one, right? So it's be socially responsible. And I can share with you that we take it incredibly seriously at Alphabet, at all the Alphabet companies, to make sure that what we are building has a positive outcome on society. And it's actually, you've all seen what's happened in the last month since the beginning of the year with the release of ChatGPT and just this massive war with AI. And I mean, that's real. I mean, I was in the middle of the team that was responsible for building the enterprise applications that were for generative AI. And part of the reason that we were slow is because we have so many people in the company that take it incredibly serious to make sure that what we are building has a societal benefit. And it's all the way to individual people. I mean, I myself have looked at opportunities that have come through deals, so to make money, and have said, nope, that's not something we want to be involved in. In fact, there was one, they wanted us to build an AI model related to insurance. I'm like, that isn't something right now that we want to be involved in. We don't want to be we don't want to get involved in denying someone life insurance based on a model like that. There's too many other opportunities that are beneficial, and that's not one that we want to focus on right now. Avoid creating or reinforcing unfair bias. It's really hard. And you brought up some really great points about how we might be able to not do that. I'm just going to spend a minute on this and I'll switch, but you can all go and look at it for yourself. There was a session that I attended a few years ago. It was probably 8 years ago or something. It was on ethics. It was one of the first ethics and AI sessions I'd attended. And the woman who presented it, we had a 4-hour workshop, and it was one of the most fascinating workshops I was ever in. And at the end of the day, what I walked away with is that the bottom line is we all are biased. Any of us thinks that you have no bias, like you're just plain wrong. Hopefully this isn't, again, a religious thing, but we have evolved in order to have bias. Bias helps keep us safe. As a baby, if they can't tell the difference between, an animal that might hurt them and their mother, or a stranger and their mother, then the group isn't going to survive, right? So it's in us. And so the important thing is to recognize that we all have biases, and we can build those biases into the models and the products that we build, unless we find ways to guard against them. And there's many ways to do it. One of the most obvious and easiest ways or not easiest, but one of the most obvious, is that you make sure that your training data is very diverse, right? And that the people that are testing the data have a very diverse perspective. And you've all heard the stories about the photos, whether it be, that represented people that were animals, or for Asians who took pictures and then their eyes didn't show up because the model wasn't trained on enough Asian pictures. So there's a lot of ways that we can project our bias unknowingly, unless we find ways to guard against it.
Okay, so that opens up for me. So just to kind of piggyback off of that, that was a great response, by the way. Yeah, I mean, most of these models were originally built by people that look just like me. Data sets were collected, and it's easy to build a model that represents yourself. It's hard to do that with other people. So for me, what I think is incredibly important is getting people together from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different ethnicities, and saying, hey, can we work together to reduce that bias? In my opinion, I think that helps build more trust in these models. I certainly don't want to use a product that's not built for me, that's not going to work nearly as well for me. That drives push from the top down. No CEO is going to say, no, we don't need to do that. We don't need to make a model that can capture a larger audience. So by voicing our opinions and saying, like, hey, this is what we need, then we can help establish that change. It brings inclusivity. And also, I think that better ideas are made when more people come to the table.
Great.
Okay, so I do work very directly in what are the frameworks, and what are they, and what do they do, and how do we navigate them, and what does this map to, and all of that stuff. So if you're looking for a generalized framework for responsible and ethical AI, NIST has one that's probably going to be seen as the standard. There's lots of other things coming out right now. Another one to look at is the EU AI Act, which will be finalized, I think. If the final language isn't done, it's very soon. I think they keep pushing things off as to when they're actually going to put it into place. The National Association of Insurance Carriers has insurance-based guidelines that are that were recently published in a model bulletin. That's not live yet, but it is very close to what the end state will be. UNESCO is another one that's put out some bulletins. And I think the World Bank. Now I'm going to step back a little bit because I directly answered the question there about AI, like ethical AI frameworks. When you're talking about building ethical AI, you need to balance, as you mentioned, Sunny, and I think Ted as well, balance risk and reward, right? And risk management as a framework and as a thing is not new. This is something that banks have been doing for a very long time. There is a very good paper, if you're into this type of stuff, by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency that really sets down what exactly you need to do within a financial institution to meet model governance standards. Now, that doesn't solve all your problems, but if you're asking the right questions when you're building models and you have people independently reviewing them and auditing what's happening with those models, you're going to go a lot farther. Now, a framework's not going to do all your work for you. You need to build the models in such a way. You need to ask the questions in such a way. You need to educate and build a culture around the principles that your company hopefully has, Alphabet certainly does, around what's going to happen when you find my model is biased and it's driving X millions of dollars per year in revenue. What do you do? What does the CEO do? What does the board do? Who's responsible? How do you change it? What do you do? You should think about all of these things beforehand. And those frameworks, while giving you good questions to ask, aren't going to answer all of the questions you need to as a company or a developer.
Yeah, and that was a great response. Thank you so much. For Sunny specifically, we've touched a little bit about how these frameworks, when implemented into the industry, you need to think about those considerations after the fact. Can you touch upon about how maybe the ethical considerations around AI and healthcare factor into maybe developing a market entry strategy for those products?
Wow. Okay. Let's see. Well, first of all, is that I think everybody's touched on this, is that most of us want to use products that work for us, but also that are ethical and that are representative and that are inclusive. And so I would argue that there is a market benefit. There's a point of differentiation if you can prove that your products are more inclusive, if they're more appropriate for a wider audience, and they're more appealing. So again, I think that Alphabet's done a fantastic job of really living this mantra of build for everyone. Has anybody seen any of the commercials on either the TV or on YouTube about build for everyone? Well, that build for everyone, it's really, really, really real. So, and that flows into a bunch of different ways that we actually operate. And in healthcare, it's more important than ever. It's really unfortunate in places like clinical trials. I think the numbers are like, most clinical trials are very homogeneous. They're primarily white men, and they are not diverse, and they don't represent the conditions for which they don't represent the ethnicities and the diversity that are represented in the conditions. So some conditions have much greater prevalence in the African American community, or the Hispanic community, or the Asian community, or the Jewish community. And most of the time, clinical trials have a small to non-existent representation from those different populations. And so it's something that we talk a lot about as a benefit to customers and a differentiator for us in the market. So I really love that you asked that question, because at the end of the day, most of us work for-profit companies. And so we have to do things that show a return on investment. And so it's part of our job to figure out, how do we make the things that are good and ethical also return, so that we continue to invest in them.
That was a great answer. Thanks. I guess we can move on to the next question, which is for every panelist, which is how do you think that we can leverage AI to address existing societal biases and promote inclusivity and diversity?
Yeah, I can lead off with that. So I think, we've talked a lot about the data sets that these models are trained on, how we collect that data, the data that you own. But I think it goes also deeper to, who are you hiring? It's important to bring a lot of people to the table, a lot of different people to the table. So I think when you think about, like, is this built ethically, it's not just, well, did we collect the data ethically? It's, do we have a diverse team that's representative of the community that says, like, okay, I agree with this, right? You don't want just one group of people saying, this is right, and that's it. You need a group of people to come together and say, we all agree as a community that this works for us. And so when you look to hire talented individuals, you need to keep that in mind and make sure that you're building the best team that's the most representative.
Sure. I'll take the next round. That was good, Ted. That was definitely an aspect that I think is really important. When I think about addressing societal biases, I think of that we are a biased society, as we've touched on here. Everybody carries inherent bias. That's going to get encoded into the work that you do. It's going to get encoded into the answers that you write out. And in the case that you're labeling a data set, that's problematic.
I'm really sorry. I'm going to stop you. Can everybody hear? Does he have his mic on?
I turned it off. There we go.
Okay. And sorry, but like, this is what we can all do. Like, there are people who don't hear very well. And so we want to make sure that everybody can hear what you're saying. So feel free in your life to speak up if you see that someone, like I saw somebody kind of doing this. So anyway,
thank you.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. If there was AI in here, it would have
exactly.
worked.
It just would have worked.
But there's not. So it's relying on my normal human intelligence, which is substandard in this case. So what I was saying is that I think that the diversity of the team is really important, but I also think of how we answer questions. We're labeling data sets. We're building our bias into every decision that we make, every data set that we label, every point that we pull, how we transform the data itself, how we create those features. The data itself is biased. We don't know who drew it, who decided to collect that specific set, that vector from whatever source information that it came from. It's really everywhere. And I think one of the things that I think is the most interesting way to do this is really build in the open. So as much as possible, I'm a huge proponent of open source. And I think that it brings a lot of people together, and you can see what's happening inside of these models, the decisions that were being made, who put them together, why they put them together. You can't see everything. But I think that's one other way that is, I think, commonly overlooked in this place.
So I want to go back to the actual question, and I didn't go last so that I could then come back and reframe this, but I actually needed a little bit more time because the questions that you all created were very thoughtful. And I think that's another just for all of us to remember. If you don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the right answers. So the question was, how can AI be leveraged to address existing societal biases and promote inclusivity and diversity? And the first time that we talked about that, I thought about it differently. But see, I see AI as an enabler in so many ways, as long as we build our models the right way. And so if I think about some of the people, I mean, it was actually funny because like I was going to do this but then what you did was so perfect. Exactly. Like if people can't hear well, if we had AI that was embedded in this microphone, then we wouldn't have to remember to turn it on, right? Or if we had hearing aids that worked more effectively for people that need them and could be more ubiquitous, then like it would, because not being able to hear well, and actually as I've gotten older, it's harder. So if I go to a big party, or if there's an area where, or if I was the person sitting in the back room, I probably couldn't have heard anything either. Or what about people who have mobility issues? And we're looking at, prosthetics that now have, like, they're very intuitive. They have even human brain connections. So those people now it's easier for them to interact with the way that our world is built, because our world is still very much built for people who can walk and walk easily, right? But I'm sure that there are many other ways. If we think about ethnicity, I mean, maybe it's an alert in our email that actually comes up if we're using a term or a phrase that might be considered by some to be make them less comfortable, or maybe can help us to write in a way that would be more inclusive. So really starting to think about how do we leverage AI to improve how we all interact with each other so that we can all be more inclusive, I think is really an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a very unique and novel approach and take on improving inclusivity in AI. I think it's definitely a really important way to think about it. That it should be something that is useful in all of our lives, and something that just helps people with everyday life in a way that we haven't really thought about before.
That's what technology has done for many of us, right?
Mm. I have a follow-up for Chris Louis on this question, which is that a lot of modern AI systems are referred to as black boxes, which means that they rely on mathematical systems that are kind of difficult to decipher for a lot of people and kind of difficult to explain in human terms. Do you have any idea about how we can ensure that if an organization has a certain ethical structure or constraints, that we can program this ethical framework into these kinds of black box systems?
That was a long question, so I have some thoughts here, but I'm going to make this interactive to start. Let's make this fun. Who here has some sort of social media account? Put your hand up. Who here has a computer? If the answer is yes, keep your hand up, right? Okay. Who here has written code before? Who here has written code in Python? Who here has written code in C? Who here understands Linux internals enough to walk through them with me right now? Who here has been in an operating systems class? All right, great. My point is that as we go down the line, we use these things every single day, and the magic in that computer and your phone has been just disseminated into the world. It is part of us. It is part of our life. I believe that AI systems are going to be as well. And while we don't understand everything, I bet there's a lot of people here, maybe there's a few, that would struggle to really describe to me what happens in an internal combustion engine. It doesn't matter that the tools are not comprehensible to everybody at every point in time. You have to understand some of the things about it for sure. So I sometimes take umbrage with this word black box, because while an abstraction layer is important, we use abstraction layers all the time for all sorts of things to understand and learn and interact with technology constantly. So if you have a black box itself, you talked about, I don't know that you could, and maybe now I'm thinking about something that's a recent paper I read, and maybe there's some pieces here, but I don't know how you would program ethics or any sort of real human feeling and not feeling, but maybe consideration of that into a model itself. But what you can do with most models, and this isn't all of them, if they're making impactful decisions, you can understand exactly what goes in and do everything that you can to understand every bit of what goes in. And you can understand everything that comes out and try and understand every bit of it. And that doesn't mean how did you get from here to here, but that does mean how exactly was all that data processed and presented in such a way? What comes out of the model? What decisions is it making? How are we keeping track of those? Are they changing? Are they not changing? And be able to run batteries of tests against these black boxes to see what comes out. As an example, if I pour gasoline into a combustion engine, I'm mostly going and turn it on, right? You're going to get it to work. If you pour water or diesel, you're not. You're going to get unexpected outputs, right? Many models have safe operating parameters. We are not generally, as a society right now, testing models in the way that, for as an example, we do within aeronautical engineering. Models fail all the time. Planes don't fail quite as much. And part of that is the engineering process they go through and the safeguards and validation that happens. Again, not to say that the thing in the middle is not complex, but there's a lot that we can do around it that is often ignored. And I don't believe that it's an unsolvable problem. There's a lot that we can do to understand it. So I know I took your question a little bit differently, but I thought this would be fun. And this is something that I'm very passionate about because you can't just say, oh, we can't understand it. There's a lot that you can still look for.
Yeah, I appreciate the interactivity that you add in your response, and it's definitely a very insightful response. Like a lot of it has to do with like how we interact with the model and not just how it internally works. Like it kind of calls back to what you mentioned earlier about like where's the data from, like who collected the data, like who labeled the data, like what are you gonna do with the output of the model. So a lot of it has to do with how the model's actually used rather than just how it's designed.
It's a huge chain of understanding that each atomic piece is not too complex for any one of us to understand, but put together and presented in such a way it seems unfathomable. And it's about breaking those pieces apart and trying to understand each bit as much as we can and growing that knowledge of how to interact with those things as we build more complex models.
All right, thanks so much for the response. And I have a follow-up for Ted, which is that you're the executive director of the Cleveland AI Group. What do you think is the role of independent developers or local teams in the larger AI space? And why do you think it is important to make AI accessible locally?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first part is kind of bouncing off of what Chris had mentioned earlier, is making things open source. And that's accelerating the development. So what we do with Cleveland AI is try to make AI more accessible to everybody. So you don't have to be an experienced practitioner to come in and say like, okay, I read this paper and we're going to talk about something that's incredibly specific. But rather, like, if we can get as many ideas in and we can say, hey, this is really important, this is what we care about, and we can actually maintain talent in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest things that we fight with the Rust Belt is losing talent. Now things have shifted a little bit with remote work, but it's really hard to convince somebody to move to Cleveland. It is. I've been at companies and we've lost researchers and engineers because people don't want to move to Cleveland. Now, this is a greater issue. It's not just solved by going to meetups and talking about AI, but building talent locally and maintaining that talent is super important to building like a strong ecosystem. And that takes investment not just from like universities, but also institutions as well, and obviously the community.
I was talking to Ted and Chris earlier about how you guys knew Brad from the previous panel, and I'm glad that Cleveland AI even exists to provide such a network for local developers within the space. But to transition into, I guess, the next question, we've kind of touched upon it a little bit, at least Sunny has with healthcare. So the question is, how can AI contribute to addressing societal challenges such as healthcare, climate change, or poverty alleviation?
I can start with that one. I'm going to leave healthcare for you, though. I'm not going to touch it.
Okay,
I'm not going to be able to do that.
Go for it.
You can. So let's talk about climate change. If some estimates of climate change are correct, we are going to be faced with an immense problem of people, migrations, immigration, leaving places where they can no longer live due to changing conditions, a lot of that being food scarcity. And in some cases, their homes are just gone or there's no land left. Like, these are not happy things. What models are really good at, and as they grow larger, they become more capable of handling more input factors, is really looking at very complex systems and outputting directionally answers that we need to look hard at to see how well they fit the things that we can do. Some places that I think would be really interesting to work in, as hopefully those premonitions or those of climate change are not correct. I would hate to see that. I don't want to see that happen. It's going to be a humanitarian crisis that maybe we've never seen before. But if they do, how are we thinking about where our food is coming from? How do we best use the land available? And maybe it's not even land, because food scarcity is where the food is and also how you get it to where the people are. So the combination of logistics and food production, I think, is a place that could be a really interesting problem to apply AI to.
So you all are here, you're either interested in AI or you're currently actually, how many people today are currently working in AI in some form or fashion? Studying AI, okay? How many, raise your hand higher. And how many of you are here just because you're interested in learning more about AI? Okay, all right. So I think we made some assumptions. So first of all, really all AI does is just helps us to do what we would do with software, but do it faster, right? So it's just an automation process. And we can run processes in parallel. And so AI can help us do things faster, and it can take some of the mundane work away from humans and give it to the machine. It's not unlike the industrial revolution, right? It used to be people had to use shovels, right? And then we got to where we could use backhoes. And so it can be scary for some. It's very scary for my mom, but it doesn't have to be. These types of automation revolutions have happened throughout all of history. You could say, the same thing happened with fire, right? So it just gives us more tools to be able to use. So let's think about some of the most challenging experiences that we have with healthcare. How many of you have ever, and this is not a health question necessarily, but how many of you have ever tried to call and talk to a doctor to get a doctor's appointment, or just so that you could know whether or not you had, that you had a sore throat? Is it strep, or is it just, an irritation? How many has ever okay, right. And you've had to wait on hold. You have to leave a message. The nurse has to call you back, and then they have to find out if you're going to get a doctor's appointment. The whole process takes a whole lot of time, right? What if we could just ask a chatbot that's actually been trained on medical information, and they could give you back an answer with a level of confidence that the answer was correct? That'd be pretty darn cool, wouldn't it? Versus just going to Google and getting a million different responses, or, a few hundred, and you have to sort through them yourself. So using virtual agents or chatbots to categorize, aggregate, and then share information back, so it makes it easier to find what you're looking for as a potential patient, could be really helpful. We can do the same thing with call center agents within insurance companies. That's another horrible experience if you've ever had to call and check on your healthcare bill, right? It's very frustrating. You had to call and talk to a bunch of people and tell them information that you don't feel like sharing and just go through this whole process. And most of the time, they don't have the information. They have to go ask somebody else or go look up 3 databases. And even some of the most sophisticated companies, some of the biggest insurance companies still have very outdated processes. So these are some of the places that we're looking at how we can use AI to make information gathering and sharing much simpler, faster, and easier so people can get back to doing the things they want. Sorry. That's the end.
So I think that leaves poverty for me. And so just like with hunger, it's a scarcity issue. It's not that there's not enough money in the economy for people, but it's rather how do they obtain that. And so with leveraging AI, I believe that we can use models to help better influence policy decisions. By making things more accessible to those that it is currently inaccessible to, we can help drive serious change. So when we look to our politicians, both local and national, we can say, hey, we expect you to be accountable and leverage technology to make the most informed decisions. It's not as fun and sexy as saying like, hey, this person's bad, or I won't do this, or I promise I'll do this, and then not. But asking them to actually step up and say, hey, there's existing technology that you can use to actually make an impact, and demanding that through your vote. That is how I think we address like real issue. It's how we help house people that aren't housed. It's how we allocate resources where they need to go, and enforcing our officials to leverage technology that allows them to do that more easily.
Switching gears, but kind of on the same regard, for Ted, with your experience in the manufacturing industry, what are some jobs that are likely to be disrupted by AI? What types of jobs are going to be negatively affected, and what are like the new types of jobs that might be formed around AI as well?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because that directly relates to poverty as well. 100 years ago, there were telephone operators. You'd call in and say, operator, give me so-and-so, and they'd pull the button, click it in, and then that job went away. Technology has always been replacing jobs. Like you mentioned, making things faster, bigger, faster, stronger. When it comes to that logistical chain of, getting product A, product from point A to point B, that's always going to be shortened. Machine learning and AI is looking to reduce that, and that will displace jobs. What I believe that is essential to coming out positively from this is looking at what jobs are going to be displaced and saying, hey, how do we take these individuals and then retrain them to benefit the society or benefit the economy? How can they take their skills that they've learned and then apply those to new fields? I currently work in like additive manufacturing. And so what that does is I give mold designers the power of 20 mold designers. And now we can bring jobs back to the US instead of offshoring that design process, because now it's competitive. So we can actually still make the same jobs too. Like people don't just lose their jobs, they can just be more powerful. You mentioned call centers. That's an awful job. I don't know if anybody's going to be super upset about that job going away. I certainly would hate to spend 8 hours a day listening to people complain to me, yell at me, and then hang up. But using tech
more effective so they can
stop happen. Exactly. And so with new technology comes also new markets as well. And so I think training people to be ready for those new markets and those new jobs is the most important thing that we can do.
Thanks so much. The next question that we have is, what ethical responsibilities do AI developers have to ensure the fair and responsible use of AI technologies?
Okay, I'm gonna jump into this one because I have strong opinions about this. In my opinion, I think it's the DNOs, the directors and officers at companies, that are responsible for making those decisions. And I think that goes down the line for any type of technology, whether it's self-driving cars or ChatGPT. Like, if you are running the company, if you're spearheading that, then that responsibility falls on you.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Okay.
But I also absolutely feel that every single one of us has a responsibility. And for those of you that are really good, which all of you are going to be really good at what you're doing coming out of this university, and because you're going to work hard and because you're taking extra time to be here, that you need to stand up for what you believe to be true. And if you're good at what you do, you're going to have a million opportunities for a job. Well, maybe not a million, but several opportunities for quite a long time. And so this is another principle that we have. In fact, it's to sometimes our leaders' chagrin that people within Google, especially our engineers and our SWEs, they don't like something, they don't agree with something, they'll stand up and they won't do it. And we've turned away very big contracts because the people on the teams did not want to work on that particular project. You've probably heard some about the work that we didn't bid on, some government work that would have been very lucrative because we just the people on the ground that were writing the code or that were leading the project said we didn't want to do that kind of work. So I think it's everybody's responsibility.
I agree.
Yeah, you're both right. Part of what I do for work is educate companies on how to structure these relationships in such a way that the developers have the tools that they, not just to know that they're making the best decisions, which in my experience, they usually do. They're not trying to do anything nefarious, but they understand what the implications of doing certain things are down the road. There's a robust educational plan. And they make best effort. Above that, you have somebody validating the work to see if they've made mistakes before it touches a customer, an end user, whoever that may be. And then at the high end, you have the directors and officers setting governance principles. This is what my company does. This is what we are about. And making sure that everybody in the company that is working on these projects understands how those principles map down to controls and questions and to workflow and education. This is a new thing, and if you ask, and I do, a bunch of data scientists how much do you know about risk management? Like I don't know. But what you can say is, well, do you want to produce models that are not biased? You want to produce models that work the best that they possibly can for and drive the outputs and the outcomes that you want. And if you're going to get a yes on that every time, but it is the job of the directors and the officers, the leaders, the auditors, the overseers to make sure that that education is available and they can understand what their decisions imply down the road.
Can I challenge Chris for a second?
Please do.
Because you said specifically about not building models that are not biased. Do you really think it's possible to build them that are not biased, or is it just more important to really limit and understand where the biases actually are?
That's a good question. So I would pose that question to data scientists to make them think about what they're doing and the decisions that they're making. Are you on purpose creating models that are biased, and would you like to do that? Versus saying that you can completely eliminate it, which I agree is not feasible in most cases. You can offset some of it and you can make best effort. Bias is everywhere though. So, and really depending on how you want to use that term, looking for bias is exactly what machine learning models do. Like this is the thing that we're looking for, bias to drive a decision in some different way. That's what it looks for. So if you have things encoded before that are problematic, which we all do, then you're going to have some level of it, but you should be addressing it and cognizant that that's a question you should be asking and thinking about how you might be able to address it.
I have a follow-up for Sunny, which is that right now, like a lot of the biggest concerns that we have are with developing AI tools for healthcare, specifically patient privacy and security. Do you think that the industry is addressing these appropriately? And do you think that there's other concerns that may be coming up in AI healthcare that are not getting enough attention right now?
That's a good question. So I don't think that. So at a high level, what's happened is that because of the regulation and a bit of our lack of understanding of the regulation, it's actually created an incredible barrier for using the data. Like, it's incredible. That's why we still have so many silos of information and why it's so hard for all of us. I mean, even at the Cleveland Clinic just a few years ago, from a patient experience perspective, you had a patient portal, you had a billing portal, you had a communication portal with your doctor, and then there was another one if you had a different doctor. And so the amount of challenges that we're putting on the patients and the users because we're so afraid of the data being either used inappropriately or because there are other business reasons for not making the data available. I think overall we're very cognizant, and we've probably put in more we've got to figure out how we break down some of the barriers, and that all starts, I believe, with really focusing on informed consent. So on that front, I think that we've stifled innovation in that way. Of course, there are small pockets, and frankly, the healthcare industry, while it's become much more tech enabled over the last few years, there's still a lot of places where the talent in the organizations isn't quite there, and so we don't necessarily people don't flock to healthcare because of the challenges that I mentioned to you before to work in the technology space, right? And so we have people that probably don't necessarily know all of the latest technology to be able to build things. And when that happens, problems can happen, right? So when you have someone who isn't up to date on what the latest information is and maybe a bit inept, that are building systems that have access to external systems, then people can get into the systems that you don't want to. There are a lot of controls organizationally and at a country level. So in general, I think that we are being conservative, rightfully so. But there are, of course, pockets where there are challenges. And then what was the last part of your question?
I guess the last part of the question was that are there other, besides the patient data privacy, are there other concerns about AI in healthcare that are like kind of like coming up and not getting enough attention right now?
So and all I can call it is an absolute craze to generative AI. I've never seen anything like it. So I've definitely been through the cloud revolution, and it took a very long time. We're still not really fully adopting cloud technologies. And yet executives within healthcare organizations, because their boards are driving them for generative AI adoption, it's really fascinating to see how fast we're trying to adopt these new technologies. And there are many benefits to them, but we also we just aren't quite sure. I mean, we can't really approach generative AI and large language models the way that we've historically approached the more general AI. And so, and you probably have some different opinions about that, so I'd love to hear it. But there's still a lot of hallucinations, and because the models can leverage so many more different factors than what a human brain can actually leverage, it's very hard for us to understand why or how the models are making the decisions that we're making. And so we just have to be really careful that we're examining the the models that are being used and how they're being used and the outputs that are coming out. And we think about what the implications of those are going to be. So I think that's an area that is moving very fast and we should be looking more closely at.
Could I piggyback off that just for a little bit? A concern when I look at like AI introduced into healthcare, it isn't necessarily around like the generative AI. It's how do we help doctors be more efficient? And
All
it's
the positive stuff.
Yeah. Well, and also, potentially the negative. Doctors are constantly looking at different charts, different pictures, all this different data. Eventually gets saturated. It's hard for them to make decisions. So building, classifiers of, is this a tumor, can help. But there's like the classic example of, putting the ruler next to all these different cancer pictures and then tricking the model to only classify things that are cancer because if it has a ruler next to it. And okay, so yeah, so somebody tells you you have cancer, you don't, but they tell you you do. You go through these tests, turns out you're fine, fantastic. But what happens when they say, no, you're fine, and you actually do have cancer? I mean, that's a huge, huge risk to take. And rightfully so, there's some friction in adopting those technologies. And making models that are incredibly precise is very, very difficult. Those models are guaranteed to always have some level of error. And what's the acceptable amount of error for you to get your cancer diagnosis? Like, that's tough.
I think what we need to do, though, is make sure that most of what we're doing in AI, whether it's regular AI or it's generative AI, needs to continue to have human in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
We're not ready to have there's very few places where we're ready to have AI just directly spit something out and someone not think and just go take action on that, right? Like even the testing blood sugar, like continuous glucose monitors, then connected to your actual insulin pump. Like there aren't companies now that are even putting those together yet because of those reasons. If you want to connect those two, which would make logical sense, then you have to do it yourself. So I think making sure that we're augmenting people and not removing people from the process is critically important.
As somebody that's very interested in application and hardware security, I'm terrified by that, of hooking the insulin pump up to something that is connected to your phone via Bluetooth.
I would agree. I think most people
Terrified.
are. Yeah, I think most people are, and that's why there aren't device there. We don't have that ability yet. But by the same token, it creates a lot of challenges for, especially because type 1 diabetes is traditionally where you need to have the pump, the insulin and the insulin pump and connected to the device. And it creates a lot of additional challenges for parents who have to then monitor both. So that's a great example of risk versus benefit. And there's a lot more work that needs to be determined. And right now the FDA says the risk does not outweigh the reward does not outweigh the risk. And so those two things are not connected unless a parent or a person wants to do it on their own.
I miss the FDA. They also have a framework.
They do have a framework.
So wrapping up here, I just want to ask all the panelists, what are some like general takeaways that you would like to share with those who are maybe still weary of AI usage or are curious about learning more about AI just because of the discussion around its ethicality?
No, you go.
You do the session. So there's something, and I have this conversation a lot with people, is that I've seen a lot of technology in my lifetime, and the generative AI craze I don't think is a fad. And I think it's a great opportunity for where you all in your career is to figure out how you make generative AI work for you. So learning how to, not necessarily, you can of course learn to write code, that's great, but learning how you write the right kind of prompts to get the right results and how you connect the different systems together so that you can actually automate more processes, like being able to direct the models and understand which models are best. So more the strategy and the making the model work. There's just a ton of opportunity there, and we're not seeing enough people. I mean, frankly, again, we launched a bunch of different products this year, and it was really, really surprising. The way that you write prompts for ChatGPT is very different than the way that you need to write your prompts for the Vertex AI platform, which is the Google platform. And we had like CIOs of incredibly respected organizations that were using the same types of prompts in both systems, and it just doesn't work. They also were trying to use models that were not built with or to use tabular data to try to use tabular data to answer questions, and you just can't do it. So these are the types of things is right now where you are, learn about this. You might have to do it on your own. Like you might have to go take some courses on your own and read books on your own to really get deep into it. But I think it's an incredible opportunity to make a great path for yourself in the environment that we're in today.
So I think you can define wary in two different ways. One might be hesitant or scared. I'm going to beat you to it. There's no Terminator. There's always an off switch. Don't anthropomorphize the technology. But
what does that mean?
Like give it human characteristics. Like it's not like a real person. You're talking to a program, a model, not something that's not something from like 2001: Space Odyssey. You're not talking to HAL. So. But I also think you can define wary as like skeptical. Like, is this just a fad? And I agree. I don't think generative AI is going anywhere. And in fact, it's only getting started. It's not just generating pictures. It's generating videos. It's generating 3D meshes.
Music, content,
I mean,
code.
Exactly. It changes literally everything about like the manual boilerplate stuff that you used to do. So I like as a practitioner, like I remember, seeing like the beginning of this, like 7 years ago, where it was just like some GANs were generating some stuff. Now it's like it's crazy, and it's only going to accelerate more. So I would not be wary of it. It's not just a fad. The second thing of if you're curious about it, what can you do? I run Cleveland AI. We have a meetup next Wednesday. It's at Cohatch in Ohio City. It's on the corner of 28th and Detroit. I would check that out. That's my quick plug. But I would also just talk to more people. In my opinion, like the open source community is really accepting. Like if you have an idea, like ask about it.
How do you find the open source community?
Google it. But no. But in my experience, I think it's just finding a project online. And it is really that simple. What we do at Cleveland AI is help connect people into that community. If you're interested in a project, we can help get you involved. But it starts with just asking.
All right, good answers over there. This is good. So I agree with a lot of what they said. This is not a fad. If you want to learn, if you want to be involved in AI moving forward, understand language models very well, and look for language models that are doing novel things. I think there's one called Gorilla that'll pull up other APIs and things, which is pretty cool. So if you think of a language model acting as an integration layer between other language models, which is I think Brad mentioned like a ChatGPT or GPT-4 could be a mixture of experts model. The power of being able to reach out in all these different places and understand things very novelly. I think generalized language models are toys. They're something that gets us excited right now, but very specific models for business, they're not going to drive the value for business that a very specific model trained on a proprietary data set is going to. It's going to be incredibly powerful for them, of being able to call on those things. And there'll be things around the edges with that, currently there are open data sets to be trained on. Like I know of as an example that might be interesting to you folks, I know a company that built a smaller parameter LLM. I think it's about, I don't know, 9 billion parameters or something like that, 9 trillion parameters on Surf, or not Surf, excuse me, on Edgar, so SEC filings. It's one. Another one trained it on the patent database. So every patent that's been issued in the United States, you say, oh, there's a demo out there, say, I want to know about every amphibious vehicle that's been patented over the last 100 years. And it'll show you exactly what they are, how they were different. And you say, now I want you to generate a new patent based on this information. And it can do that. It's amazing. It's crazy.
It is amazing.
It's so much work, but there's so many little niches where these things are going to be incredibly powerful. So explore. I agree with Ted. Project-wise, like there's no magic here. You just sit down and do the work. You just put the Python together, and keep digging at it, come up with an interesting problem, ask people around you what it is, reach out to people in the community. We're mostly nice. We will look at your project. We'll think it's cool. We'll wish that we were doing it instead of whatever it is that we have to do day to day now. And really enjoy it. I'll leave everybody with, I'm not going to go deeper. You guys did a great job here. One of the things that I always think of, somebody much smarter than I said it, and I don't remember, so I can't attribute it. But imagine, you know how fast things are changing right now? It's never going to be this slow again. Never going to be this slow again. And if you're interested in any of what's going to happen, go back and read about the Luddites. Go back and read about the Industrial Revolution. Go back and read about, just the really beginnings of AI and how things happened and then where we are now, and look at the compressing timeline. It's amazing. And that's it. I'm going to be rambling now. So thank you all.
Maybe somebody wants to ask a question of us.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that was all the questions that we had for the moderators had for the panelists, so we can move to a Q&A session. So if anybody in the audience has any questions, then they can raise their hand and we can call on you.
I just have a general question. I know that you guys probably touched upon this in another way, but is there should there be limits on the adoption of AI when it comes to life-changing decisions? From a student perspective, this could be hiring algorithms. So all you want to get is hiring. So other example would be autonomous vehicles. So what would be your view, or maybe if you could share your organizational view on this aspect?
What do you mean by limits?
Limits in terms of, okay, so when it comes to decision making, should we use a model, for example, hiring? Do you use hiring algorithms when you use to decide whether someone should be hired or not? So do you need to have limits or regulations on that? So what's your take on that?
Yes, because if you don't, right, especially for things like hiring, you can end up being very biased, and we don't want that. So it's really important to make sure that you understand whatever, frankly, any model that you're creating, any algorithm that you're developing, any analytics that you're developing, you've got to keep in mind what data is going in and what results are coming out. And do they, have you considered the unintended consequences of those?
I mean, it's hard to disagree with that statement. I don't. It's the challenge I think that we face is when companies open up a position, they can get flooded with applications, and I'm not sure of how to balance reviewing those applications manually without having some type of technology-enabled process. I hate to say I don't know the answer to that, but like I certainly don't want to reject somebody because they didn't put the right keywords in their resume. Like that, what you type on a paper it's so hard to condense like who you are as a person. And I hope maybe in the future we make some type of shift from a one-page resume and like your CV or whatever to something that's really more descriptive of who you are and what your talent is. And maybe that's something that we can get there with AI.
Just for 1 second, there are some really great tools out there, and some of them are free. So at the end of the day, I hate it too, but there's no other choice, because when you're getting hundreds or thousands of resumes, you have to use some technology in order to help sort through them. So it's really part of your application process to go figure out what are those keywords that are necessary. And I don't know the name of it, but I know that there is at least one program, and probably many, where you can take your resume, you can take the job description, and you can compare the two, and that software will tell you how well your resume matches what the job description is. And I think you can do like 3 or so at a time before it charges you. So like, use the tools that are at your disposal. This is the world that we live in now, and you really have to figure out how you can optimize yourself in it. And you all have a huge advantage over people that haven't had your schooling, your background, access to computers like you do. And the bigger concern I have are for people that don't have access to a reliable internet, don't have access to a computer at home. Like those are the people that we really have to be very concerned about. Not that you're not important, you are, but you have the ability. You just need to apply yourself and ask questions. Sorry, Chris, did you have something?
I was going to touch on the hiring thing. So as a note, New York City passed a law about the use of modeling and algorithms in the hiring process. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's some disclosures around it. And there's some, we were just talking about more like ATS type of stuff, right? And looking at keywords and running them through a system. There are some things that I find fairly terrifying in the hiring world that appear to me to be digital phrenology. So they take a video of you, and then they're judging the video, and like, how do you turn? What do you say? How confident are you? Like, what are they scoring on? I don't know. I would love to see New York get a hold of that and have them come out and say exactly what they're doing. But some of those things are really, you just answer questions on a video and send it in rather than an interview for the first round. Really, I find it dehumanizing, and I don't love that at all. So beyond the technology thing, you're trying to get hired, reach out to people that work in industry and talk to them about the project that you're building. Ask them for introductions to people that are working on cool things and that need help and are hiring junior people. It's a much more effective way than dealing with the rest of it, if you can do so.
LinkedIn's a great tool.
It is. Reach out. I'll talk to you.
I have a question for you. What do you say to people who say that we can't afford to have barriers on AI because some other company, some other country has no ethics and they're going to build it faster than us and it's an arms race? So what do you say to people who make that argument?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There are always going to be people that decide or want to or advocate for throwing caution to the wind and hurting people and making decisions that are counterproductive over the long term, over the short term. I don't know where the line of regulation should be. I'm not necessarily an advocate for the 6 months off that some of the tech CEOs called for. I'm not necessarily scared of ChatGPT. It can't do some of the things that I wish it could do already. But I feel like that is a misguided and disingenuous statement. So there could be are we talking about an arms race, like a real arms race, right? Like maybe we are. If we're in defense and something like that, we should probably know how far things can go, but we have an ethical, I believe, responsibility to not take things past a certain point. I don't know where that point is, but I would hate to hear that. I would be leaving that company immediately. That's tough.
Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. Unfortunately, I think we have to start wrapping up here just because of time. But that's all the questions that we can answer for right now. Thank you for coming out and speaking to us. Thank you for being willing to talk about your experiences. Everyone here very obviously is very open to talking about their experiences, so please don't hesitate to reach out and talk to them. David and I would just like to thank everyone for coming today and talking to us. Thank you.
Thanks. It's been great.
Thanks to the organizers.